Okay, welcome to the ninth episode of the Douglas Social Credit Podcast. Um, my name is Dr. Oliver Heydorn, and I'm joined by William Waite. And today we thought we would just go through a few of the memes that have been created to communicate Douglas's ideas to a wider public. So they're about, I think right now they're about 250, soon to be 300 different memes that fall into various categories. Douglas's political thinking, his economic thinking, his philosophical thinking, thoughts that he had about history, and another category which is just miscellaneous. But what we can do is we can choose some of those at random, just a few, and use them as a sort of a diving board or a jumping off point for further discussion. So what I'll do is I'll go into one of them here, and he's got so many great quotes, of course, that it's sometimes hard to choose any particular one. But I've got one here that the libertarians should appreciate. Okay, can you see that one, Will?
I can, yep.
All right, so this is a quote from The Development of World Dominion, which was a book that was published posthumously, and it contains excerpts from various articles, various speeches, various books, or I should say manuscripts, things that had not really been published before. And it's quite interesting. So one of the quotes in that book reads as follows. It appears to be proved beyond argument that Lord Acton, in his much misquoted dictum that all power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, was enunciating a natural law, so that the more powerful a government is, the more certainly it will deteriorate. So, uh, one of the basic philosophical and political ideas in Douglas social credit is that power, whether we're talking about financial power, economic power, power is something that should be distributed. It's something that should be decentralized. And that's the safest place for power. If you want a stable, successful society, you need to find institutions, regulations, mechanisms so that power is always being distributed, so that everyone has a little bit of power. And that doesn't mean that everyone has to have the equal amount of power, but everyone should be guaranteed at least a little bit of power. And when you've got that kind of widely equitably distributed system of power, then it becomes very difficult for any one person or faction to monopolize anything for their own benefit at the expense of everyone else. So we see here again with this particular meme that and the libertarians are right, I think, when they warn about the dangers of government, the dangers of centralized government. It's not, of course, the only problem that we face, but certainly governments now are more powerful than they have been in the past in Western countries, and and with that comes corruption, the misuse of power. Also, it's necessarily something that disenfranchises people because the government's power grows, comes at the expense of our power, right? We have to sort of give
Mhm.
power over to the government in order for it to do things. And it should be pointed out that from a Douglas social credit point of view, the reason that governments have grown to be so powerful and so large and so intrusive is the fact that we have this recurring price income gap in the economy. There's this underlying deficiency of consumer buying power, and it's not compensated for in the way that Douglas advises, which is with debt-free consumer credits, the dividend and the discount. And so one of the ways of filling it is to rely on the government to borrow more money into existence and to spend it on government projects, government works, government programs. And so partially one of the reasons the government is so large is that it's trying to manage economy that is anemic, where there's this destabilizing inbuilt deficiency of purchasing power that always needs to be compensated for in some way. Um, and
Mm.
they're not going to compensate for it properly along the lines that Douglas suggests. So we've got debt, we've got increases in public debt, and we've got the government deciding policy in terms of what that additional money is going to be spent on and how it's going to actually be injected into the economy. If we had a Douglas social credit system, a lot of what the government does right now wouldn't have to do anymore, and we could significantly trim the size of the government. Don't know if there's any
Mm.
other thoughts you have on that particular.
I suppose one thing I did think was, what do you mean by government? I mean,
Mm,
a lot of people, when you say government, will immediately think about, the elected officials and the bureaucracy and the people who occupy parliament and so on, who make the laws. But Douglas also defined government more widely than that to include he said that the financial authorities were governments in themselves,
mm,
and certainly uh, the the boundaries between business, governments, finance, they're becoming increasingly blurred.
mhm.
We don't really know how big the government is, because past a certain level, they all seem to be acting in concert.
Yes, yes.
And the mismanagement of finance that you were talking about, how you've got this price income gap, and the government has the power to borrow more money into existence than spend it through government programs. I mean, that actually increases the power of finance.
Mhm,
I mean, if the governments depend upon the banking system to allow them to continually borrow more money. And I
mhm,
remember over the COVID period, when the whole world simultaneously decided that, well, not the whole world, rather the world's financial system simultaneously decided that they would provide money to lock people in their houses.
mhm,
I remember the Australian government was actually thanking the banks for their understanding on the issue, which does imply that the government the government wasn't in control of that decision at all, but that there was a government by money, if you like, that
mhm.
sits outside what we typically think of as government.
Right, right.
Um, and I think, if we go back to the quote there, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, and that implies you know, the more powerful a government, the more certainly it will deteriorate. I think COVID provides a very good example of that principle. I mean, we had in that time a very good example of um, a government getting a very great deal larger in a short period of time, and it
Mhm,
was essentially chaos that ensued. I mean, there were new laws every week. No one knew what they were supposed to do. No one, certainly, people weren't being asked what they thought.
mhm.
The infringements on civil liberties was, we've never seen anything like that in history, in the West, I mean, as
Right.
far as I'm aware. Maybe in wartime,
Time. Yeah.
and that was also, war conditions were also invoked to kind of justify what was going on.
Mhm.
Um, so I would say that over that period you had an example of this principle at work. Very few people now would agree that that was well done. That went well.
Right. Right.
Mm.
Yeah. There is, I don't know if I can find it at the moment, probably not, but there was actually a quote, another meme that we have. I think it's in the social credit economics section that talks about this very point that the banks have become, and the banking system, the financial system has basically become uh, a de facto government unto itself.
Yes,
And
I
so,
think Thomas Paine defined government as limitation.
Hmm.
In his book Common Sense, I think it was. And if you consider government in that way, then certainly, a society indebted to the banks is certainly a limited, like this enormous indebtedness we have to the banks, and we have to continually service this debt and ensure that our credit rating is up to standard so that we can apply for more.
Hmm.
You know, obviously that is a limitation on the actions on what society and the people in society can do.
Right.
I mean, how if you wipe that debt out, how different would the world look overnight?
Mm.
There would
Mm.
be a hell of a lot of people not doing the things that they were doing before,
Hmm.
because suddenly those financial limitations had been lifted.
Yes.
So I see certainly, by Thomas Paine's definition of limitation, and I hope I got that right. Um, as government as being limitation, the financial powers definitely satisfy that definition.
Mm. Mm. Yes. Um, there's another meme here that we might kind of bring into the discussion here, which is kind of interesting. This one is from Warning Democracy. And Douglas says, money and the money system now occupy the place of religion.
Sure.
And that's quite interesting because he's basically saying that, and to tie this in with what we were just talking about, money, the money system, the banks, etc., the financial system as a whole is basically the animating principle of society, of the whole civilization, right? It's the bottom line. It just determines what can be done, what can't be done, who's going to do it, who's going to be rewarded, how much they're going to be rewarded for what they do, and it becomes a kind of end in itself. Now, if we consider that the existing financial system is structurally dishonest and unjust and dysfunctional, then the animating principle that's running our civilization is also dishonest, unjust, and dysfunctional, right? So it's kind of like
Mm.
you think of it as the software on which we're running society, on which we're running civilization. If the software is fundamentally faulty in various respects, then obviously we're going to have all sorts of social, political, cultural, environmental, international difficulties as a result. And
Mm.
so the need is to fix the software, to adapt it so that since it does play such a central role in our society, that it actually could give us more satisfactory results than it has been. Without getting into too much detail, I have had some discussions with various people who are not Christian, and they believe that the problem with the modern world, and particularly the West, is Christianity, right? They want to say Christianity has made us weak, it's made us soft. Um, it has inculcated habits of mind or thought that basically are suicidal, right? It's a very sort of Nietzschean sort of take
Mm.
on Christianity. And certainly there are forms of Christianity that are soft and self-destructive, or certain ways in which Christianity has been interpreted. But I try to say to these people that, in my view, based on the study of Douglas social credit, what you call Christianity or the churches as institutions, or what you call anything, religion itself is, in fact, downstream from finance. That finance is where the buck stops. Finance is the great organizing principle. And if you live in a society, in a civilization as we do, where money and the money system occupy the place that was once occupied by religion, and it's faulty, it's dishonest, unjust, dysfunctional, then everything else that's downstream of that, including the churches, including the kind of Christianity that we know, it's all going to be corrupted. It's like the Lord of the Rings, right? The one ring to rule them all. Everything else, the media, education, entertainment industry, everything sort of becomes uh, distorted, well, artificially limited, distorted, perverted by this diabolical financial system under which we live and move and have our being. So, the idea that, oh, we'll just get rid of Christianity and then everything will come right. It's like, but finance is still in place, you see.
Mm.
So, yeah,
Are these people defending the financial system by saying that Christianity is the real problem, or are they just saying that?
I think they're completely oblivious, more or less oblivious to the role of finance. They're blind to it, you see.
Mm.
And they
There are
don't.
so many people drawing a direct line now, obviously, between the distortions and dysfunctions. Like, if I think of Joe Rogan, for instance, who's a very popular commentator, he carries on about the influence of the pharmaceutical drug companies.
Mhm.
The problem of the military industrial complex and an out of control war machine. I mean, these problems, which are very real problems, and distortions of things which, in their proper place, are quite fine. I mean, we need a defence force, and we do need to make available things that will heal people when they're sick and so on.
Yep.
But it's this not the profit motive, but really what happens when you get a monopoly operating
Mhm.
over a certain sphere, and there's basically no controls, and the priority of those um, markets or industries, if you like, is just how much money they can make. I
Mhm.
mean, it essentially becomes distortionary, doesn't it?
Yes.
The very cause for their existence becomes lost next to the requirement of making money and
Right.
doing the best for the shareholders, etc. Whatever.
The financial pressures and having to answer to financial demands and constraints and this sort of thing.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm.
So, yeah. Do you have any particular meme that you wanted to share,
I
or
don't I
you
don't
I
have them up at the moment.
I can pull another one that's fine.
Another one that's fine. Yeah, you pull another one up.
All right. So this one here is from Major C.H. Douglas Speaks, 1933. And I think this is from an essay called On Truth, which is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful essay that everyone should read. Pure genius. And Douglas says, we are beginning to recognize, however, that this constant tendency to present a false picture of what is actually going on in the world extends all through our civilization. And I
Mm,
mean, that's obviously taken out of a certain context, but it ties in with what we were just speaking about because the existing financial system is the sort of system that provides us with a false view, a false picture of the real world. It's it's
mm,
um it's sort of like I wrote up an article on this recently. It's sort of like if you look at a thermometer is a tool. We use it to measure temperature, right? Now, if we were to think about this in an Aristotelian way, we would say that a good thermometer is one that fulfills its purpose, that fulfills its function well. So the purpose of a thermometer, what do we want from it? We want to tell the temperature. If it's 27 degrees Celsius outside and we take the thermometer outside and it reads 27 degrees Celsius, then it's a good thermometer. It's giving us accurate information, right? It corresponds to the reality that it's supposed to describe. The financial system is also a tool. But the present financial system does not automatically give us these accurate readings. Rather, because of the way it's designed, it systemically underestimates our capacity to produce, and it systemically underestimates our capacity to consume what we have produced, right? So it's
Mm,
giving us false information, and not just false information, but information that makes it look like we are poorer or less capable than we actually are. Now, when it comes to like the flow of real wealth, we've got to find some way of getting additional buying power, like we were saying before, and we do that through debt. But it's important to recognize that we're always starting off on the basis of these false pictures. The picture that is painted by the financial system in the virtual world of numbers does not capture or does not map onto, maybe that's the best way of saying it, does not mirror the real physical
mm.
world, our real physical capacity to produce goods and services, nor does it correspond in terms of consumer buying power. It doesn't correspond to the real wealth that we're producing. And that fundamental lie, that sort of embodied falsehood, can then only generate more dysfunction and more falsehood. And so if, as Douglas says, if in fact it is the case that, we look through our civilization and we're always getting in the media, in the educational system, in healthcare, we're always getting this tendency, we're always observing this tendency uh, to get a false picture of what is actually going on, a picture that does not correspond to reality. It all starts ultimately with the false picture that is painted by the financial system.
You could look at it like that. You could also look at it um, from a different perspective. You could say that finance is a tool,
Mm-hmm.
and that it is a tool of the powerful, and that its primary role is to project this false image of our economic reality. And then if you can get people to believe that, scarcity is a thing that we have to worry about, and the only way to manage a financial system is as a debt only financial system, and all these other things that Douglas identified as being um, dysfunctional,
Mm-hmm.
then it's a tool not for the representation of abundance, economic abundance, but for actually enslaving people,
Mm-hmm.
enslaving societies, and making tools of men, because
Yes.
that's what the financial system does. It doesn't make free men; it makes tools of men and women, tools of people who are in power. And I think Douglas would agree with that idea too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
undoubtedly. So you have a situation where the the projection of a false picture of what's actually going on in the physical economic reality is used as a point of leverage in order to impose a self-serving policy on the part of the owners of the financial system. In other words, if we look at the real flow of wealth, let's say we produce $100 million worth of goods and services in a month, let's say in a particular country, what we're saying is the financial system as it's designed, it only automatically distributes a lesser amount, maybe 60 million in terms of wages, salaries, and dividends. So there's that gap of 40 million, the deficiency of consumer buying power. Um, and the financial system will compensate for it, but somebody has to go into debt, right? A consumer has to get loans, or the government has to get loans, or businesses have to expand and maybe export the surplus or whatever. But the point there is that somebody has to get into debt, somebody's got to pay the servicing interest charges for that debt. And finance ultimately is calling the shots as to who is going to get how much and under which conditions and for what purposes.
right.
Right? So it's actually the falsity is what gives the financial powers the ability to take advantage and impose a self-serving policy on the rest of the economy. And that's how wealth, power, and privilege are centralized under the existing financial system, which is, and that's why it stays in its place. I mean, it's terribly dysfunctional. It creates all sorts of problems, but it's also the goose that's delivering the golden eggs for those who own and control the system.
It's like we're allowed to address all of the problems that it creates, except by addressing the main cause of the problem,
Mm.
which is a dysfunctional financial system.
Yeah, yeah. And if we could solve it all by dealing with the problem at its root, but then that
Mm,
would eliminate the opportunities that are presently being exploited.
mm,
And so vested interests, of course, that's not something that they would want to do. I think I said last week, Douglas makes the point that an alcoholic will do anything to stop certain side effects of drinking too much, like delirium tremens, except stop drinking, which is the one thing that would, in fact, solve the problem on a long-term, permanent sort of basis.
mm. Yes, this is the situation we're in.
That's right. That's right. Um, any other suggestions in terms of memes? We've done three. We might be able to fit in one more. If let's see here. I can pull another one up unless you have a suggestion.
I have one. I have one here, but I'm not really sure how to stick it up.
Okay, so you just go to the share button and it should give you the option of picking the particular
Oh, yes.
image.
You've disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh dear, how did I do that?
Damn you.
All right.
Just want all the control.
Yes, all right. Well, tell me which one you want and I'll pull it up.
Uh, I was going to choose the industrial machine is a lever continuously being lengthened by progress,
Uh-huh.
which enables the burden of Atlas.
Yes. So
It's one of my favorite. It's a big one though.
that's number 42, I believe. Okay, let's see here. Let's see, share. And let me see here. Okay, can you see it there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm seeing double.
Oh, you're seeing double. That's no good. Let's get that out. Okay, how's that?
Yeah, I'm still seeing some of your stuff behind, but that's fine. We can see it fine. So this one says Douglas writes in Credit, Power and Democracy in 1920. The industrial machine is a lever continuously being lengthened by progress, which enables the burden of Atlas to be lifted with ever increasing ease. As the number of men required to work the lever decreases, so the number set free to lengthen it increases. So this is a metaphor he's using here for how the industrial machine sets people free from the requirement to work, and as it sets them free, those people go out and actually work to improve the industrial machine, which further sets more people free. And I think that, I mean, this is a very, this has been a topical issue for a long, long time now. We're apparently in the fourth industrial revolution.
Mhm.
But with AI on the horizon, or AI with us, this problem of labour displacement is very likely going to become acute.
Hmm.
One of the things that I've been, and I would say it is presently acute. Like one of the things that I've been very interested in for the last little while is this phenomenon of bullshit jobs. So between 30 and 40% of work that is being done,
Mhm.
the people who are doing it don't believe that the work they're doing is providing any meaningful contribution
Yes.
to anybody. So we're already in this situation where, the necessity for employment to earn an income is basically making people's lives meaningless.
Hmm.
And it's as a result of this process of automation, which has been ongoing for hundreds of years, which the financial system cannot integrate, refuses to integrate. I mean, the obvious thing to do is to, as the machine displaces labor in industry, the obvious thing to do is to issue a dividend,
Mm.
in order that so that those people who lose their jobs can continue to consume. I mean, there's no, it's not like there's any less production coming out of industry. In fact, there's more.
Hmm.
But as you kick people out of work, or force them onto a dole so that they get less money and have to live in insecurity, not only does that cause a lot of additional social dysfunction, but it also means that you cease to enable them to consume what is being produced.
Hmm. Hmm.
And of course, the other thing that happens is you give them a job to just keep them busy.
Right.
So much of that going on, and this. Yeah, would you like to
Yeah,
pick it up?
I just saw today, in fact, that there are two universities. One of them is the University of Adelaide, and another university. They're merging, and apparently they just announced today that beginning, I think it's 2026, there will not be, generally speaking, there will not be any in-person lectures. They're going to be delivering the content fully online to their students. And so we've come to the point now when we knew it was going to happen. And I'm not necessarily saying that this is the best thing, that this is the best way of teaching, or that we should automate everything that can be automated. I mean, you can have those discussions, but the point is, it actually, whether it's better quality or lesser quality or the same, this university is actually delivering all their course content, or will be delivering all their course content in a way that sidesteps the needs for actual physical lectures.
Mm,
Staff are up in arms, of course, because now I suppose they feel that their jobs are in some way going to be threatened. Or maybe they won't need as many professors, or they won't have as many full-time professors, or however, whatever the impact is going to be. Obviously, this is partially to make it more convenient to students, but also it's going to be a cost-saving measure. Um, but this is not, this is just the natural progress of technology. We're going to be moving more and more in this direction. And
mm,
yes, there might be some things that we say, okay, just because we can do something doesn't necessarily mean that we should. But there are many things that are better done by machines than they could ever be done by a human being. Maybe because the work is dangerous, or it's really monotonous, or it's dirty. We can all think of examples, and this is something that both the financial system, but also people's psychology, has to change to adapt. I mean, this, if you don't have to work quite as hard, and the job is that's being done is just as good or better, then shouldn't that be good news? Isn't that, it frees you up to do something more meaningful than what you were doing in the past? So,
sure. Yes.
yeah.
I mean, at the same time, we have all this social dysfunction, which, you know, largely could be addressed by allowing people to do the things they know they should, but
Hmm.
which aren't necessarily paid.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's a lot of things that people are letting go by the wayside because they don't have the time, or are too tired, or
Yeah.
like I'm in education, and one of the big worries is that increasingly kids are not being kids are not coming from stable homes.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, this is not entirely an economic thing, but very largely it is. I mean, a lot of parents are both parents or single parents, they're having to work,
Yeah.
and they're just not. They don't have the time in the day to look after their own children properly.
Right, because that's not a paid activity, so it's not important, or I shouldn't say not important, but it's not going to be prioritized by them when they're trying to meet the bills.
That's right. That's right. I mean, the most important thing in raising children, I suppose, is to have a house.
Hmm.
If the only way you can maintain your house is by going to work,
Yeah,
then you're going to go to work, and
yeah,
you can justifiably say that that's for your children,
yeah,
but it just means that you can't go to work and look after your children in all the other ways they need looking after.
yeah. We've got to sign off. We're coming to the end, but our websites are socred.org and thepeoplescredit.com.au. Please like and subscribe, and we will aim to join you next week. Thank you.
Yeah, bye for now.